Our next tracing involves urine production and urine flow. We call this trace urine from the glomerular capsule to the outside of the body in both the male and the female. Turn to page 824 of your textbook and your lab objectives on page 35, and then also look at the photos on the Q drive. Here we can examine the nephron. The nephron is the functional unit of the urinary system. It's the structural and functional unit of the kidney. There are millions of nephrons within each kidney, so these are microscopic. As you have just learned, there are capillary clusters within each glomerulus. The capillaries are surrounded by specialized cells called podocytes. Podo meaning foot. They sometimes call them foot cells. These create thin slits that serve to separate large materials in the blood from small molecules by a screening action or a sieving action. Any material passing through the slits will enter the proximal convoluted tubule, a good name since it's close to the glomerulus and thus proximal, and is certainly convoluted. If you look at it, notice the curves in that canal. Just look at the diagrams. The podocyte anatomy can be seen on page 819 of your textbook. We can continue the tracing by following the diagrams and models. Urinary material next moves from the proximal convoluted tubule to the nephron loop. The nephron loop has a descending portion and an ascending portion, and each has a thick and thin region. Thus the tracing goes to the thick descending limb, to the thin descending limb, around the bend, to the thin ascending limb, and then on to the thick ascending limb, and then flows into the distal convoluted tubule. Whew, did you get that? Notice the thick and the thin. During the journey through the nephron loop, much is changing in the urine concentration. We'll discuss this in more detail during our lecture. So here you see that the nephron loop has thick limbs at the top and thin limbs at the bottom. The descending limb thick and thin, and the ascending limb thick or thin and thick. I can't even get that straight. Well, you can see it in the diagram. Several distal convoluted tubules will join into the collecting duct, which empties out through the renal papilla. The renal papilla is the apex of the renal pyramid. Urine flows to the minor calyx, which joins with other minor calyxes at the major calyx, and these together form the renal pelvis. Leaving the renal pelvis is the ureter, one ureter for each kidney. The ureter, or ureter as some people say, the ureter flows to the bladder. The ureter and bladder are lined with a specialized transitional epithelium. Its cells stretch and change shape from cuboidal to squamous, thus we call it transitional. Turn to page 825 of your textbook to view the histology of the urinary bladder. What canal leaves the bladder? Did you say urethra? Can you sing it? Oh no, that's Aretha Franklin that I'm thinking of, not urethra. I heard it through the grapevine. Don't worry, I'm not even going to attempt to sing it. To control urine exit from the bladder are two sphincters. First there is the internal sphincter, then the external sphincter. In the female, the journey ends through the urethra and out the urethral orifice. In males, there are three regions of the urethra to study. So there you have the tracing of urine from the glomerulus to the outside in both males and females. You can check this out on the Q drive as well.